The bell above the coffee shop door jingled softly, echoing through the small, cozy space filled with the rich aroma of roasted beans and freshly baked pastries. A man stepped inside dressed in a plain grey hoodie and worn jeans, his sneakers quiet against the polished wooden floor. He moved with a calm, deliberate pace, careful not to draw attention. To the regulars who frequented this little cafe every morning, he seemed just like any other customer, ordinary, unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of the bustling shop. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the unassuming exterior of this man was Michael Stanton, one of the wealthiest men in the world, billionaire, visionary, tycoon. Yet today, none of that mattered to him. Michael had grown tired of the endless meetings, the polished boardrooms, and the artificial smiles that surrounded him in his world of luxury. For once, he wanted to step away from the golden cage his life had become and experience something genuine, unfiltered and real. He had spent years building an empire, acquiring companies, and amassing wealth that most people could only dream of. But despite all the material success, there was a part of him that felt empty, a longing to understand life. Beyond the glossy magazines, red carpets and social media headlines, he wanted to know what it felt like to simply be a person among people, without the weight of billions shaping every interaction. Today he came to the coffee shop with no entourage, no assistants and no cameras, just a desire for a simple cup of black coffee. As he approached the counter, his eyes scanned the room carefully but without judgment. The shop was alive with motion, baristas calling out orders, customers chatting over laptops, the soft hum of music mingling with the clatter of cups and spoons. A young waitress looked up from her register and offered him a polite, practiced smile. She had seen countless faces, each with their own story, but something about this man was subtly different. There was a quiet strength in the way he held himself, a calmness that seemed to absorb the chaos around him rather than participate in it. "Just a black coffee, please," he said, his voice low and steady. No frills, no special requests, simple and unassuming. The waitress nodded, punching in the order with a swift efficiency born of years behind the counter. She handed him his coffee and wished him a good morning, unaware of the monumental wealth that quietly rested behind his hoodie and jeans. Michael found a small corner by the window, a spot that offered both a view of the street outside and a sense of privacy inside. He settled into the chair, wrapped his hands around the warm cup, and let the aroma of coffee fill his senses. Outside the world went on, people hurrying to work, cars passing by, a mother juggling a stroller and shopping bags. Inside, the cafe felt like a sanctuary, a microcosm of life untouched by luxury and fame. For the first time in years, Michael simply observed, allowing himself to be part of the ordinary flow of life without pretense or expectation. It was liberating, almost intoxicating. He sipped the coffee slowly, savoring the bitter richness, and let his mind drift, finally free from the constant pressure of the world he had created. He was invisible here, just another man in a hoodie, quietly existing, blending seamlessly into a world that had no idea who he really was. The coffee shop was alive with movement and sound. Laughter from a group of friends at a corner table mingled with the constant tapping of keyboards and phones. The baristas called out orders in rapid-fire succession, their voices blending with the soft hum of background music. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries filled the air, creating a comforting cocoon from the outside world. Michael sat quietly at his small corner table, the steam from his cup curling around his face. He inhaled slowly, letting the rich aroma ground him in the simplicity of the moment. He had imagined this moment countless times. He had rehearsed how to look natural, how to blend in without attracting attention. No designer suit, no flashy watch, no entourage. Just a hoodie, jeans, and a desire to experience a slice of ordinary life. And yet, even as he tried to disappear into the background, the chaotic rhythm of the cafe made him feel surprisingly small. The laughter, the chatter, the mundane worries of strangers, they reminded him of a world he had long left behind. A world untainted by boardroom decisions, shareholder pressures, or the weight of billions. As he reached for his coffee, savoring the warmth seeping into his hands, something unexpected caught his eye. A small piece of folded paper had slid across the counter, moving almost imperceptibly, until it came to rest near his cup. He blinked, unsure if he had imagined it. His eyes scanned the room, but no one seemed to notice. Customers laughed, baristas barked out orders, and the usual rhythm of the shop continued uninterrupted. His gaze fell on the waitress, the young black woman who had taken his order. She was busy with another customer, but when her eyes briefly met his, she gave the tiniest of nods. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle acknowledgement, almost as if nothing had happened at all. Michael's curiosity flared. Carefully, he picked up the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, almost delicate, yet it carried a quiet authority. Michael read the words slowly, letting each one sink in. "Not all who wear a crown are free. Don't forget why you started." The message hit him like a sudden gust of wind. He froze mid-sip, the warmth of the coffee forgotten, his mind swirling. It was so simple, so brief, and yet the weight of it was almost unbearable. In that moment, he realized that no amount of wealth, power, or influence could shield him from the truth he had been avoiding. The world he had built had made him forget his purpose. The very empire he had worked tirelessly to construct had also built invisible chains around him. For the first time in years, he felt a shiver of vulnerability. A stranger, someone with no knowledge of his identity, someone who had no reason to care, had seen through the armor of his life and reminded him of the person he once wanted to be. The words lingered in his mind, echoing louder than any boardroom meeting or media headline ever could. Michael looked back toward the counter. The waitress had moved on, serving another customer, her presence almost ethereal in its quiet confidence. Yet in that fleeting moment, she had delivered something far more powerful than a drink, a truth he could no longer ignore, a reminder that shook him to the core. Michael sank deeper into his chair, the warmth of the coffee in his hands now a distant comfort. He stared at the dark liquid swirling in his cup, but his mind was far away, spinning with the words he had just read. "Not all who wear a crown are free. Don't forget why you started." They were so simple, yet they carried a force that shook him to his core. He could feel the layers of his carefully constructed life, the empire, the wealth, the power, peeling away, exposing the man he had almost forgotten he was. For years, Michael had built his empire with a single-minded purpose. He had wanted to create opportunities for people, to solve problems, to leave a mark on the world that mattered. At first, the work had been thrilling, exhilarating even. Each deal closed felt like a victory, each acquisition a step toward building something monumental. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the vision had blurred. Meetings became endless, the pressure became constant, and the weight of responsibility became suffocating. In chasing success, he had allowed himself to be consumed by it. Now, sitting in this modest coffee shop, surrounded by the ordinary lives of strangers, Michael felt the enormity of what he had lost. He had been so focused on power and wealth that he had forgotten the very reason he had started his journey, to make a meaningful difference. And yet, here it was, a single note from a stranger, a young waitress he had never met, reminding him of what truly mattered. It was remarkable, almost humbling, that someone who knew nothing of his fame or fortune could speak to him with such clarity. Her words had cut through the armor he had built around himself, the walls of ego, pride, and obligation. They reminded him that no amount of money or status could substitute for purpose and human connection. The realization struck him harder than any boardroom rejection, any failed deal, or any moment of public scrutiny. Humility washed over him, unexpected and powerful. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel small, not insignificant, but human. He realized that his wealth, as vast as it was, meant little if it wasn't wielded to make a real difference. Empires could crumble, companies could fail, but the impact one could have on the lives of others, that was the true measure of success. He looked up, intending to find the waitress, to thank her for this gift of perspective. But she was gone, absorbed in the next customer. moving with the same quiet efficiency and kind smile that had first caught his attention. It didn't matter. The moment had already passed from her hands into his heart, leaving an indelible mark. Michael sat back in silence, letting the weight of the realization settle in. The coffee shop buzzed around him. But the noise no longer distracted him, it grounded him. He understood now that wealth was meaningless without purpose, power empty without empathy, and success hollow without contribution. The note was more than a message. It was a mirror reflecting who he had been, who he had become, and who he could still choose to be. And in that quiet moment, Michael Stanton, billionaire and tycoon, felt the stirrings of a man ready to change, not for the world, but with the world, inspired by the unexpected wisdom of a stranger. Unable to shake the note's message, Michael sat for a few more moments, letting the words echo in his mind. The bustling cafe around him seemed both distant and familiar, a world he had almost forgotten existed. Each laugh, each conversation, each mundane detail reminded him of what life could be without the constant pressures of boardrooms, deadlines, and endless decisions. Slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. Placing them carefully on the table, he added an extra amount, far beyond the cost of his coffee, leaving it as a token of gratitude. Then, almost instinctively, he picked up the note again. Folding it neatly, he slid it back toward the counter, where the waitress had been standing just moments before. She glanced down, her sharp eyes catching the movement. She raised an eyebrow, half smiling, as if sensing something significant had just passed between them. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. The connection was quiet, subtle, yet profound. Michael's voice, low and almost hesitant, broke the silence. "Thank you for reminding me what matters." The words felt strange leaving his lips, as though saying them out loud made the realization more real. Her eyes softened, holding his for just a heartbeat, a moment suspended in time. She didn't know who he really was, nor did she need to. In that brief, fleeting connection, something meaningful had passed, an invisible bridge built between two strangers from entirely different worlds. Words, honesty, and humanity had been the foundation, and in that instant, it was enough. Michael took a deep breath, savoring the feeling of lightness that was slowly replacing the usual heaviness he carried. For decades, the weight of billions had rested on his shoulders, pressing him into a life defined by expectations and obligations. Every decision, every move, had been calculated for profit, reputation, or influence. Yet here, in this ordinary coffee shop, a simple note from a stranger had accomplished what no meeting, no lecture, no business seminar ever could. It had made him pause and see himself clearly. He stood up, pulling the hoodie tighter around him as he prepared to leave. The bell above the door jingled again as he stepped into the morning sunlight, the streets alive with people going about their routines. But Michael felt different. The world didn't feel heavy anymore, and for the first time in years, he felt free from the invisible chains of wealth, from the constant pressure to achieve, and from the distractions that had blurred the purpose of his life. A spark of purpose had been reignited within him, small but fiercely bright. He understood that his wealth was not an end in itself, but a tool, a responsibility to make a meaningful difference. The note had stopped him cold, not because of fear, but because it reflected a truth he had been avoiding. It had stripped him bare, showing him who he truly was beneath the persona of a billionaire, and what he still could become. As he walked down the street, Michael's steps were lighter, more deliberate. The world stretched out before him, full of possibilities, full of people who might one day be touched by choices he would make, not for status, not for recognition, but for the sake of making a difference. And it all began with a simple note, a few words from a stranger, and a quiet act of human honesty that had changed everything. That single encounter in the coffee shop became a turning point that Michael Stanton would never forget. It was more than a fleeting moment. It was a mirror held up to his life, reflecting truths he had long ignored. When he returned to the boardroom, He was no longer the same man who had left his offices for a morning of anonymity. Gone was the narrow focus on profits and expansion at any cost. In its place was a renewed sense of purpose, a vision that went beyond wealth and status, one that centered on people, on communities, and on creating meaningful change. Michael began to scrutinize his empire in a way he never had before. Every business decision, every investment, was now weighed not only by its financial impact but also by the good it could bring into the world. Companies were restructured to include programs for employees' education and well-being. Startups that had once struggled to find funding were given support, particularly those led by passionate entrepreneurs from underserved communities. Michael had finally realized that true success was not measured by the size of a bank account, but by the lives he could uplift with the resources he had. The memory of the young waitress lingered in his mind. She had no idea who she had spoken to or the power her words had wielded. She had offered him nothing but honesty and human kindness. Yet her simple note had done what no mentor, no life coach, and no book could achieve. It had reminded him of the essence of being human. Inspired by that moment, Michael made it a personal mission to seek out everyday heroes like her, individuals whose insight, courage, and integrity often went unnoticed. He created initiatives to empower ordinary people doing extraordinary things, ensuring their efforts were recognized and supported. Michael's philanthropic work expanded rapidly. He invested in education programs in impoverished areas, launched scholarships for young innovators, and funded community centers where creativity and skills could flourish. He visited these communities personally, not to be seen or photographed, but to listen, to learn, and to understand. The lessons he had learned from a stranger in a coffee shop about humility, empathy, and the importance of purpose guided every step he took. Over time, Michael Stanton became a legend not only for his business acumen, but for his humanity. His name was associated with compassion as much as with wealth. People admired him not just for the billions he had accumulated, but for the hearts he had touched, the opportunities he had created, and the lives he had changed. And the irony was beautiful. The catalyst for all this transformation was a small piece of paper handed to him by a young black waitress who would never know the magnitude of her impact. Her words had stopped him cold that day in the cafe. They had shaken him out of a life driven by ego and reminded him that influence and wealth are nothing without purpose and empathy. From that moment forward, Michael lived with clarity, intentionality, and a heart wide open. One encounter, one note, one brief connection had ignited a ripple effect that would reach countless people, proving that even the smallest gestures can have extraordinary consequences. In the end, it wasn't just Michael's fortune that defined him, it was the humanity he rediscovered and shared with the world.